From KSMQ Television in Austin, this is On Q, connecting interesting issues and interesting people. On Q.
Let's go, everybody, let's go. Come on, girls, come on, enough with the hair. Go. It's the deck. It's the deck, let's go. Hey, everybody, come on, Patricia, wake up. Come on, let's go. Okay, let's go. Danny, turn off that radio.
Now, that wasn't my family, maybe it was yours, but our guest Bill Callaghan grew up with 10 brothers and sisters along the shores of Lake Michigan, learned some important life lessons in his large and lively family, and joins us now to share some of those stories in his new book, Raised with Praise. William, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we were talking that there are similarities in your life between yourself and that wonderful movie Caddyshack.
Yeah, well, as growing up in Milwaukee, I was a caddy at Milwaukee Country Club, and there was a lot of Brentwood to Milwaukee Country Club, and so we had the Judge Smales and the Dr. Beepers and all those characters, very much so. So it relates to that.
Was your life as chaotic as we showed on that at growing up? Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you know, my mom and dad had set it up so that, you know, they had rules in our house where, you know, you can't say shut up, and you can't, you know, have any kids in your bedrooms.
No tattling.
No tattling was one of them, correct. In fact, they would spank the tattler versus the one being tattled on.
Wow.
And that was kind of a way of just keeping it to where you work your differences out between your brothers and sisters.
And that's some of the things you put down in print on your book, Raised with Praise.
Right.
Growing up in that large family and bringing some of those life lessons that you think were very successful to you today.
Very much so. My mom and dad's approach was more proactive than reactive. You know, they, you know, in interpretive communication, you know, half of it is body language, and your tone of voice is about 30–40%, and the rest of it is just the words that come out of your mouth. So how you say what you say to your kids is really important. And so my mom and dad decided to, you know, set down some ground rules, and I think they had to, you know, with such a large group of people. You know, the boys slept on the 3rd floor, and the girls slept on the 2nd floor, and you know, once breakfast or lunch was over with, the kitchen was closed, and you couldn't go in and make a sandwich or, you know, do your own thing. But in there, it was organized chaos. It really was, a lot like that clip that you showed at the beginning of this.
And we have pictures. You brought some pictures along of your family, the whole team, in the early ages, and then more recently. Mm-hmm. You published this book kind of as an autobiography and as a tribute to your folks, and fortunately they were able to read it before.
Yeah, in the year 2000, I got this idea. I was sitting in a hot tub in Chicago, and all of a sudden this idea landed like a cannonball in the tub. It was like, you should write a book, call it Raised with Praise, and get stories from your mom and dad and brothers and sisters. And then in 2007, I'd come home from a trip, and someone had broken into my car and stolen my entire manuscript. And so everything was gone, all the pictures, all the writings and everything. And so from that point, I decided to really get busy and really focus on it, because the goal was to finish the book while my parents were alive and still had a chance to read it. And it was just 8 weeks after I self-published in 2009. And my mom unexpectedly died of pneumonia just 8 weeks later. So I accomplished that short-term goal.
And you've now been picked up for reprinting, and it's in more national distribution now. So
yeah.
There's a whole new audience for this book. Does Raised with Praise, does that mean you don't criticize your kids?
Yeah, it's actually being raised in a positive light. It's free of criticism, and more of a parent's approach is, you know, they're your first teacher, and so my mom's attitude was, you know, I'm here to teach you, and when things happen that, you know, you could, you know, I'd walk in the back door with mud on my boots, and she just had cleaned the floor, and instead of reacting and going, oh my gosh, get out of that, you know, oh crap, instead it was, hey, it looks like you brought some of the backyard in with your shoes. Let me help you get your boots off. You know, it was that kind of approach. It was not so reactive, but more proactive. And that's what I grew up with.
So do you mean to say that there were never problems that you would get disciplined for within your family
Oh, no,
unit?
that definitely was. You know, my parents ran a pretty tight ship, and you knew where the fence posts were, and you knew, when you'd go out of line. And, but their attitude was, we're here to help you learn. You know, we're not here to find fault when you make a mistake. And so it was that different approach. And that's what I thought was special, and that's why I wanted to share this story with the world. In 2014, Tate Publishing out of Oklahoma discovered this book, and they decided to take it nationally and publish it, which was really exciting. It was a very humbling experience. It's something
wonderful.
I didn't expect, yeah.
Right. And we should point out we're talking with Bill Callaghan. We're talking about his book, Raised with Praise. And folks, there's one special little entry here that I saved just for us, and I hope I can find it here. When kids are young, where is that now? Oh, here we go. Sesame Street was a lifesaver because they'd watch it while I made lunch. Sesame Street, a show, of course, on KSMQ on PBS. So
Sure.
Sesame Street helped you raise your kids a little bit. A little bit.
Yeah, and when you're at home with your kids, my wife would be working at the hospital, and you really get to appreciate what moms do. There's a whole chapter in here dedicated to moms, because moms are minute by minute, moment by moment when it comes to raising kids. Dads are more day by day, and so I would sit down and watch Land Before Time and Sesame Street and these different shows with them, and you learn a lot, and just putting yourself in that setting with your kids.
And daily chores. You find if you can get your family maybe to do chores for somebody else in the family, like helping clean up the other person's dishes, it helps them kind of get out of themselves a little bit and help the rest of the family instead of just thinking about themselves.
Yeah, that's right, and I that's how I was raised with 10 brothers and sisters. You had a lot of opinions in our home, and you had a lot of input, and so when my wife and I went on to raise our 4 kids, I tried to draw from some of those things that I learned as a kid, and incorporate that as a parent. It's funny, the oldest kid in the family is the one who teaches the parents how to be parents, because the way you're raised and the way your wife is raised is always 2 different things, and those differences get exposed when your first child shows up, and then you realize we got to find some common denominators, and we got to put this together and move forward with it with a solid approach.
One of the points you make that was moved me, that I understood very well along those lines, is that when you may have a disagreement with your significant other about an issue going on with your children, you write that your parents always left the scene and went by themselves to discuss it and then came back out with a resolution instead of battling it out. And I found that so difficult. I mean, because you're busy and kids are running around, it's just easy to make a quick decision.
Yeah.
And disagree, and move on. But that was very important to them.
Yeah, that was really sharp, and so you wouldn't see them battling amongst themselves, sorting out a situation, but when they would come back into play, it was a cohesive approach. It was, this is what we're doing. This is, we're both in on this together, and this is how we're going to move forward. So my mom and dad raised kids in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and they went on, to have those 11 kids went on to have 35, grandchildren, for them to enjoy. So I think always being around that young, new life coming in and surrounding them, kept them young at heart. They really were. They're very young at heart.
It would be easy to imagine that as the young people in that huge family grow up, they grow apart and really don't like each other very much. But you have stuck together. You have a family business together.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think, I work with 4 other brothers in our family business, and I've worked in the company since 1980. And our dad is 92 years old. He comes to work and he answers the phone, which is hilarious in and of itself. And it's unfiltered, I think, in most cases. But he raised 11 kids, and 5 of his sons worked together in this business. And I really attribute a lot to that. Is when we were kids growing up, my parents weren't big on Christmas presents under the tree. They would pack their family into 2 Volkswagen buses and head off to Florida, and we'd go to Daytona Beach, and we would get to know each other. And it's a gift that still lasts today, because the idea, and as you know, when you go on a family vacation, you're creating memories and you're creating lifetime events that are close, that only you get to share with your family. So they're special. And so as kids growing up, we would do that, and we got to know each other, even though the oldest was maybe 22 years older than the youngest. It spanned over a couple of generations.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. And fascinating book, a lot of work. You wrote it twice, basically.
Yeah, there was a lot of work that went into it. I was thrilled to get it done, and I really appreciate you having me here today.
Sure, Bill Callaghan, and it's published by Tate Publishing. The book is called Raised with Praise. Look for it on Amazon, maybe coming to a bookstore near you very shortly.